Can you grant me presentation rights, please? Hi all, good morning. Hello, am I audible? Hi Sasi, unmute yourself and speak. Sasi, you are saying we will wait for 5 minutes, okay? But it is 7 o'clock, 4 minutes now. Let me know when to get started, I will get started. In the meantime, whoever has joined, any question from your side, Guljar or Sasi? Unmute yourself if you want to speak. Guljar, Sasi, any doubts by far? How are you liking the session? Are you comfortable writing script on your own? Okay. But I see only 5 attendees, only 2 attendees online now. Do you want to get started now? People are there in the class? Can I get a yes, no? No, sir, wait. It is already 6 minutes past. What shall I do by waiting? Why don't I ask a question then? Whoever are there in the class, would you like mind writing a query? Yesterday we completed the dead time functions, right? Can you write a query to give me the last day of current month? Anybody who want to attempt? Till the time we're waiting, please give me a nod so that we can get started, okay? I will wait till somebody confirms to get started. Anyone having any doubt, go ahead, ask question if you want, because we are waiting for folks to join in. Today's session is a light session, so no rush. I can still wait. Shall we get started now, or we have to wait for the? Shall we get started? It is already 7:07. Feel free to unmute yourself, speak if you have any question. Okay, start, sir. Okay, fine. Okay, so today's session is all about constants. Okay, in English, the constant mean difficulty, or I have some. We typically say in English, right? I have constants. That's why I couldn't come. I I was I had a constraint. That's why I couldn't show up on time. Right? Constants in English means some rule, some restriction, some difficulty. Correct? In SQL, in SQ, the rules that we'll study today holds good for all the database product across ecosystem. Syntaxes may vary, and we'll verify the syntaxes when we study the PostgreSQL version of the SQL. Minute changes are there in the syntax, but majority of the syntax for the constraint remains same. Do remember, constants are database rules. Okay, you place rules on the database saying what type of data can be stored in a table. Do remember, constants are essentially meant for the table. Okay, constants can only be applied to the tables. Constants make sure what kind of data goes into the table. There is another term, if you study in Google about the constraint, you will find it makes sure data integrity and authenticity. What do you mean by integrity and authenticity? That means the data looks authentic. Okay, if a email, if a phone number field is supposed to carry out numbers, it shouldn't contain alphabets within that, because of valid phone number doesn't have a alphabet. It has to be a number. It is okay to have a plus sign, but it cannot have a number. You think about employee table where there is no ID column. That means if I have to identify in a company like TCS or Infosys or Accenture, a kind of company where lakhs of employees are working, I want to identify a person whose name is Sasi Pritam. How do I identify that? Right? There may be multiple Sasis working in that same company with the same last name even. Right? You need to have some rules or have some integrity within your database system to make sure whatever data goes into the database system is clean, is authentic, and is making sense. To ensure all these pieces together, there is an object available in SQL Server known as constraint. Not only in SQL Server, all the database product. Do remember, whatever we are studying is available in every database system. We are studying one of the specific product called a SQL Server, but essentially you can write the same queries, same syntaxes, majority of the time without changing a single keyword within that. Till now, whatever we have studied will work 95% in all the database product system. Okay, if you go to Oracle, MySQL, whatever database product you choose, syntaxes remain same. Why? Because SQL syntaxes are postulated and owned by American National Standard Institute. The first version of the SQL came out in 1992. That is why you see the version SQL 92 written in some of the articles. SQL, then there will be a subscript known as 92 or superscript known as 92. Okay, the first version came in the year 1992. That is why it is known as the SQL 92 standard. As per the SQL 92 standard, there are 6 type of database rules that you can define, or 6 type of constraints or restriction that you can apply on a table. Okay, when I talk about data gets stored in a table. So constraints can only be applied to a table. That is the logic behind it, why the constraint only applies to the table. Okay, now let us understand what exactly the constraint is. Constraints are used to restrict the insertion of unwanted data in any column. We can create constraint on a single or multiple columns of any table. It maintains the data integrity of the table. We'll see what do you mean by data integrity. Just lean through these words. It is okay to listen through the words only, and then we'll understand one by one together. SQL constraints are used to specify rules for the data in a table. Okay, this enforces rules for the data in a table. SQL constant do what is specify the rules for the data in a table. You do remember, constants are database object that applies rules or restriction on a table. You can remember the definition as that way. Constants are database object that applies rule or restriction on the data available in a table. Okay, now a constant are used to limit the type of data that can go into the table. That is again a type of rule. How do you actually insert the constraint in a particular table? This ensures the accuracy and reliability of the data in the table, which is true. It maintains the accuracy and reliability of the data. If there is any violation between the constraint and the data action, the action is aborted. Okay, fine. Let us first go and see what are the rules, and then we'll come back to the definition one more time. If you don't understand, it is absolutely fine. Do remember, constant mean these are rules. If I ask Sasi, he cannot enter the session or enter the class after 10 minutes of starting, right? That is a rule that I can enforce on the class. I can say that in a particular batch, there will be no more than 35 students. That can be a rule on a batch, right? You can think about putting some restriction on some system is known as constraint. So what are your constraints? Constraint or what are your rules typically, right? So in SQL Server, there are 6 type of constraint. The first important constant aspect is known as primary key. Primary key enforces unique data and no null value. If you, I will actually ask you to take some notes today. Okay, I will talk about it, but I will ask you to take some notes because this particular topic is interviewer's favorite area. Okay, in any interview you will go, you will find a question on the constraint. It is absolutely must you will get a question on this area. Okay, so when I say take some notes, please take some notes. Do remember, for a primary key is a rule that enforces no null rows, no null value can be inserted into a table. Absolutely null value for a specific column cannot be inserted. Another thing, if you define a primary key constraint on a particular column on a table, then that particular column is enforced to have unique value. It enforces two things. When you define a primary key constraint on a particular table's column, the particular column where you are creating the primary key constraint, that particular column cannot store null value and it cannot store, um, it has to have the unique values. It cannot have the duplicated data within that particular column. That is the primary key constraint. Foreign key constraint bind two tables together with the same kind of data. That means if you have an employee table and you have a department table, in the employee table you have a department ID column, right? And in the department table you have the ID column. There cannot be an employee who is working in a department that does not exist. If you want to make sure those kind of restriction, that means somebody is trying to, in the department table there are only 5 department, 1 2 3 4 5. Okay, in the employee table somebody is trying to insert that one employee is working in department 6, which is null and void, right? Why? Because there is no department in the department table called as department ID 6. How come an employee can work in a department that does not exist, right? So if you want to make sure the data integrity between two tables, in those cases you have to leverage the foreign key constraint. Foreign key ensures the data integrity between two tables, two relational tables together. Now coming back to the third type of constraint, unique key constraint. Unique key constant is a type of, it is actually equivalent of the primary key constant, only deviation being in the primary key it never allows a null value. In unique key constant it allows a null value. In SQL Server it allows only one null value. In Oracle it can allow multiple null value, but in SQL Server it only allows one row of null data. Do remember, the most frequently asked interview question, what is the difference between primary key and unique key? Any interview will go, you will find this particular question coming in one or the other form. What is the difference between primary key and unique key? Primary key does not allow null value. Primary key ensures all the data in a particular columns are unique. Unique key also makes sure all the column in a particular column, the data in a particular column are unique, but it allows only one null value. Okay. There is another constraint known as not null constraint. What is a not null constraint? If you apply a not null constraint on a specific column, then essentially you are asking that a particular column cannot be inserted with a null value. Okay. It is not null means explicitly you are saying this particular column cannot be inserted with a null data, right? If you want to make sure that your past name of any employee cannot be a null value, you can just deploy the not null constraint. Check constraint. In case you want to define a custom rule, you have your own custom rule. I will say I have a age table, and I know in my employee table I cannot employ a I in my organization I cannot employ any employee whose age is less than 18. I want to say whenever you are creating an employee record, it should throw an error if one employee record is getting inserted less than 18 years of age, right? I want to create a rule, custom rule on age column. In those cases where you want to create a custom rule, then go for a check constraint. Okay, you want to make sure the phone number field contains only numeric value. You want to say that phone number field only contains always contains 10 numbers, right? Those are rules. If you want to create custom, that means I have my own custom rule. A first name has to be 5 characters long, right? You want to make sure those kind of rule on database, then leverage the check constraint. Default constraint is the type of constraint that ensures that for a specific column, if specified a default, that means even if you do not specify a value for the column, the default constraint inserts the default value for the corresponding column. Okay, if you define a default constraint for a gender column and you specified the gender's default value is M, even if one employee record gets inserted without the gender value, automatically the default value of M will be inserted into the table. We'll see everything one by one together now. I just given the brief about all these 6 constraints that you should be aware about. Primary key, no null values, unique data. Unique key, one row of null value and unique data, not null, absolutely no null value for a corresponding column. Check constraint, custom rule, default constraint, or default value for a specific column if not specified. Foreign key, it is a relational integrity constraint. What do you say why it is known as a relational integrity constraint? Because you can enforce, you can look for a value in other table, and you can ensure that if you are looking for a value from other table and you are trying to insert a corresponding value in this table, then if the other value does not exist, you cannot insert this particular value. Okay, now we'll go into each of the constraint one by one. We'll start with the easiest constraint right now. I will drop the table. I will go back to my screen. I will drop this particular table so that we can leverage all the code again. Okay, I'm going to create a particular table called as the EMP table now. Okay, we'll first study about the not null constraint. What a what is the ground rule for not null? Not null means the if a not null constraint is specified for a particular column, you are making sure a null value cannot be inserted for that particular column. I'm going to create a table called as employee table, EMP table. It is not employee, EMP table. And then I'm saying the ID column, you will have a numeric type of data. Name column will have a string type of data, but these two column I'm specifying as not null. Total mark, it is okay if the student doesn't have a mark inserted, because once he appears for the exam, then only the value can be updated later on also. It is fine to have that. Okay. If my ambition is that, what I'm saying, employee ID cannot be null and name cannot be null. These are the two rules I specified on the table. Now, if I create this particular table, this is how you create a not null constraint on the column label. Okay, not null constraint at the column label. So now I have created a table where the not null constraint is created, and I have applied the not null constraint on ID column and the name column together. Now, if you see, I have mentioned that ID column cannot have a null value, name column cannot have a null value. Total marks, it is okay. If I try to insert a null value, it is still fine. Okay, we'll see through. I have my constraint available. So what I'm trying to do, insert into the employee table, ID, name, total mark, values. In the values clause C, I'm trying to insert the null value into the ID column now. Can you see that? 3 mapping, ID null, name Robert, and total mark 1063, right? Let's see what happens if I try to insert this data. Cannot insert a null into the column ID. Table study.dbo employee does not allow nulls. Insert fails. Do you see that? If by mistake an employee wanted to even insert a null value into the table did not accept the data, right? This is what the purpose of a constraint is. If by mistake somebody is trying to insert a garbage type of data that is violating by a rule, is trying to insert that kind of record into the table, SQL Server will fail those queries. Okay, that is what the purpose of a constraint is. If I did not have this not null constraint applied, then it would have accepted is. Why? By default, it accepts all null values. By default, a specific column, if not specified at the not null constraint, accepts a null value. Okay, let us see the second query. Here, I'm supplying a value for the ID. I'm passing a value as ID as 1, but now I'm passing the name value to be null. But I have a not null constraint deployed in the name column as well. If I run this particular query, I am trying to insert a null for the name column, but it will violate my name rule. Can you see that? It is saying cannot insert value null into the column name. Why? The table column does not allow the null value. The name column does not allow the null value. Why? Because I have a not null constraint applied on the table. Now, if I try to insert a record with this as a null value, there are two things that I want to do. I want to insert one with my ID is 1, which is not null. Name is Robert, which is not null. I would insert a null record for my total mark. Is it possible? Absolutely possible. Why? Because my total mark doesn't have a not null rule. Can you see? Total mark saying I can accept null value. So when I did this and I do the select star from the table, then you can see the data is getting inserted. Data is getting inserted, one for the ID, name Robert for the name, but total mark is null. And if I specify a specific value, will it accept? Yes, because if you do not specify a rule, it can have a null value, it cannot have, it will have a null value specified. If you do not specify, if you specify a not null value, it will accept the not null value as well, right? So by default, if you do not specify anything, it accepts a null value. Clear about the not null constraint? Anybody having any question by far? That's correct. So that was the question that I asked. Perfect. Any question by far uh, on the not null constraint? Thanks Uday for confirming. Anyone? Sandhya, Sasi, Srini, everybody understood clearly? Pradeep, Manideep, Kalyan, are you all clear about the not null constraint? Okay, fine. Let's move on to the next type of rule. So not null is the simplistic rule. Do remember it can be applied on the column level, not at the table level. There is no table level constraint actually. There are some table level constraint that you can apply in Oracle, but in SQL Server we don't have a table level constraint. We will talk about that. What do you mean by table level constraint actually? Do remember in the in the employee table, we have now studied that we can apply the not null constraint to more than one column. Is that understanding correct? We can accept not null, apply not null. It didn't bother how many columns are you are asking a rule as a not null value. Okay, this is the command way of creating it. How to create the not null constraint? This is the command way of creating it. How about doing another way of doing the same not null rule? Go to the study database, go to the tables, go to the EMP database. This is the new table that we have created. Right click on the table, go to the design. Okay, right click on the table, go to the design. Once you go to the design, there is a flag called as allow nulls. This column, I have highlighted this particular column. Can you see that? By default, this is allow null means you are saying you can accept null value for a specific column. Do remember, I have created ID and name as not null. That is why by default it is unchecked. That means it is not allowing not null. In case I want to say, do not allow a total mark to be null value, I can uncheck this particular value. Correct? That means if you uncheck, that means you can apply a rule saying that total marks cannot be a null value. Clear about that? This is the another way of doing it. I would always recommend to do it through the code. Always do any command using the code is the preferred way of doing it. Okay. But if you can't, then definitely you can leverage the database designer to do that particular thing as well. Okay. Now let us understand the unique key. Let's move to the unique key constraint. Okay. What did I say during the definition of unique key? I say unique key is a constraint that does not allow any duplicate value for a specific column, and it it allows one null value to be inserted into the column. What does it do? It allows no duplicate value. Okay, if you say unique rule for a specific column, there will not be a there cannot be sorry, there cannot be any duplicate value specified for that particular column. Okay. Let us verify what that particular thing looks like. So say for an example, my EMP table does have 3 columns now. Okay. I want to make sure that let me truncate the data, because still why don't I drop the table and recreate so that at least I can show some more value. I will say drop table EMP, and then go ahead and create one more time. But this time, what I want to do, this time I will be creating unique key constraint. So how do I do that? I will create the same table. Create table EMP, ID, name, and total mark. What I will do for the ID column, just observe. Okay, what I'm saying, for the ID column, I am specifying, I will say ID int, I will say constraint, I am applying a constraint, so I will say ID int, constraint name I will give. Unique key is given a name, unique key, UK. You have to give a constraint with constraint name. Constraint name, UK underscore. The naming convention is always do what type of constraint, then underscore, then the table name, and then on which column you are applying the constraint. What I'm saying, I'm creating an unique key on employee table on the ID column. This is a name I'm giving. Do remember the way it works. The column, data type, constraint keyword, then a constraint name. It is just a name. Constraint name. I will say unique key. Unique, UNIQUE, unique key. Okay. In SQL Server, you don't need to specify unique key. You can just say unique. That will work. Okay. What I'm creating now, I'm creating a table with ID column as a unique column, name column as a not null column, and total marks as a integer column, right? I will refer the same insert queries. Let's see what happens. What did I say? My ID column is specified with a rule called as unique constraint. Let's first create the table. I have already created a table. Let's drop the table. Let's create the table again. Okay, table created with my rule. My rule says ID constraint prime. It is the unique key rule. Now I am saying my unique key is applied to the ID column, and name does not allow a null value. So I am 100% sure my name field cannot be null because I have understood the not null specification. So I have to specify this. But if I specify the ID with a null value, will it accept? Is the question, because I have defined a unique key. Now do remember the rules say not null constraint can accept one null value into the table. So if I specify null row for the first time into the table, it will accept. Let's see that. One row got affected. That means it accepted the insert query. Is that correct? That means if you see the data for the ID column, which is defined with a unique key rule, it accepted a null value. Can you see the ID accepted the null value? But if I want to insert the same record one more time, just see, I'm trying to insert the same null value one more time. What it is saying, violation of unique key constant UK employee ID. I know what constant this particular thing is. It is for the ID column. I know it is saying the unique key is violated. Why? Cannot insert duplicate key in the object employee. The duplicate key value is null. What it is saying, you can only insert one null value into the table. Already a null is there. You are trying to duplicate the data. Are you getting that concept now? So do remember, unique key allows you one null value. That particular rule is validated. Now, can I insert not null value into the ID column? Absolutely yes. I can insert the not null value into the table as well. Let's insert a not null value. Cannot insert a null into the column name. I'm trying to insert a null value into the column name. Let's see, we'll say name is Rahul. Okay. I'm trying to insert now an ID called as 1 and name as Rahul. Let's see, will it accept? Ideally, yes. Why now? ID is 1 and Rahul is not null, so it accepted. Let's see how the data looks like. Okay, my ID, one null value, one value of ID is 1. Now, if I want to insert one more row with the same ID value, will it accept? Can you see the violation of unique key constant happened? Why? You are trying to insert a duplicate value of 1 into the table, and it will clearly call out that there is already a value 1 already available in the table, and you are trying to insert another value of ID as 1 again into the table back. So which is violating my rule. So SQL Server will not allow allow duplicate data to be inserted for the unique key constant. Okay, but every row of the data for that specific column where your unique key rule is specified has to be unique and not null, and it only accepts only one null value. You can see it accepted. Why? Because 2 doesn't exist, so you can have one unique row of ID as 2. Can you see that? Okay, that is what a unique key constant is. Now there is another interesting thing that you should learn about unique key is you can have as many as unique key in the table. I have applied unique key on ID column. Let's say for an example, let us add 2 column into the table. Sorry about that. Let us add 2 more column into the table. How do I add 2 more column into the table? Alter table name, add column name data type size, comma, column name data type size. This is how I can add 2 column extra after creating the table. So I have created the columns. Do remember, if you have already some data and you are adding some new column, this is an interview question. Do remember, you have, when you created the table, you had only 3 column, right? And they had some data. Later on, you added 2 more column. What will be the data row for the email and mobile number? Whatever new column that you have added, what would be the data value for those column? By default, if you do not specify any default value, the data rows will become null. Do remember this? Okay, this is an interview question. If you are adding a new column into an existing table, what would be the value of the values in the existing rows? The value will become null. Now I want to create another unique constant on the combination. Can I do a unique constant on a combination of column? Yeah, we have seen the constant on a particular column. Can I create a combination on name and total mark at the combination? Or can I create a combination on the email and mobile number as one unique member? What I want to say, I want to uniquely identify each of my member. That means if there exists or email and mobile number combination, no other employee can have that same email and mobile number combination. That is what the rule I want to create. So how do I do that? What I would say, alter table name, add constraint name. Constant name, you know, it is a uniquely constant on the employee table. I'm creating on the email as the column. Email, and I can say also phone number, mobile. I can say a name. It is just constant name, constant name. Then I am saying what type of constant, unique, and what type of column, email and mobile number together. Okay, the combination is unique. So let us create this rule. It will not allow to create. You know why? Because already in the table there are multiple null values. Can you see that? Email, mobile number. This one row is allowed because unique key constant allow one null value, but there are already duplicated null values, right? So it is immediately verifying I cannot create the rule because you have already duplicate data, and it is violating my own rule of the unique key constant. That is why I will not allow you to create a unique constant on this particular table. Okay, how do I do that? I have an option. I can always truncate the data, truncate table, emp. So let's clean up all the data. Cleaned up. Let's see what data is left. Nothing is there. Can I now copy the same data records? Okay. Now what I will say, now I have two more column. I have email, and I have a mobile number to also insert. And then can I say insert email as abcd@gmail.com and mobile number as 9876543210. Okay, this is one combination. And can I do the same duplicated? I will copy the same row again, Control C and Control V. Okay, let's see whether it accepts or not. If I do the insert into EMP, let's see whether it accepts. Yeah, one row got inserted. Can I see the data? Control V, select star from EMP. Yeah, I see one unique data set, ID value 1, email abcd@gmail.com, mobile number, one particular number. Now, I want to duplicate the same record. I will say ID value cannot be duplicated, so I change it to 2. Now I want to try to insert the same email and the same mobile number combination. Okay, for the ID value 2, ID is also unique key constant, correct? And these two combined together also create a unique key constant. So what I will do, I will insert the same value again for the combination. It accepted. You know why? Do you remember? Did I create the mobile number rule? Let's see. Oh yeah, I did not create the rule. That is why it accepted. Sorry about that actually. That is what I was wondering. Sorry about that. Truncate the table. Then I will add this constant. I am creating this particular unique combination. Now I will insert this record. It will accept. Now let's go back and insert the second record with the duplicated row set of abcdgmail.com. Okay. It is violating the rule. Okay. Why? It is saying the violation of unique key constant on the EMP email and mobile number combination. Why? Because this particular pair of data already exists. Can you see that? It is saying this particular value that you are trying to insert already exists, right? So you can have n number of unique key constants in a table. There is no rule how many unique key constant you can create on a table. Second, there can be more than one unique key constant on the table. Like we have already seen, we have created one unique key here on the ID column, one unique key on a composite column. This is known as a composite column. Okay, composite means what? If more than a key or a constant or rule is created on more than one column together, that is known as a composite column or a composite key. At times, people talk about this as a composite key as also. What do you mean by composite key? If a rule or a constant is created on a combination of column, then it is known as a composite key. Okay. Now, I will take a pause. Are you clear about the unique key constant? Any question by far? Anyone having any doubt? Are you clear about the unique key constant rule? Data cannot be null. Two rules. Data has to be unique and it only supports one unique value. It doesn't support two multiple unique values. Okay. Now I'll move on. Now we'll move to the next category of constants. Okay, now let's see. Now I will go to the primary key constant. Okay, in the primary key constant, we have to remember weird. Let's see, Control A. Let's change the font size to 14, maybe it'll be better. Yeah. Do remember, primary key is the exactly same rule as of the unique key. Only thing that you need to remember, how are we creating a primary key? The same way that we created a unique key, we can create the primary key on a particular column. Typically, what rule the primary key enforces is if you define a particular column to be the primary key, it it has only one rule. Okay, the rule is the data has to be unique and it does not support any null value at all. Okay, the difference between the primary key to the unique is in primary key you cannot insert any null value into the column and the data has to be unique across that particular column where you are defining the primary key rule, right? And then the and another rule that is different between the primary key to the unique key is you can have only one primary key per table. Okay, I will tell you why it is that way. Okay, do remember I did not talk about one more thing while explaining the unique key. Okay, I'm not going to explain what that particular thing is today because we have indexes coming up, but do remember whenever you create an unique key, okay, do remember unique key by default creates a non-clustered index for you. Okay, I'm just going into the employee table. If you are seeing my screen, I'm going into the indexes grid here. Can you see there are two indexes created for me? One index name as UKEMP that is my unique key on the ID column. Can you see that? That is one of the index getting created, and there is another index known as UKEMP email mobile that is also a unique key, and both are saying non-clustered. Can you read it out? I'm highlighting them from the left side of my grid. Okay, both are saying non-clustered. What are the indexes? Why they are getting created? We'll study tomorrow. We have the indexes session coming up tomorrow. We'll understand more. But do remember, by default, when you create a unique key, it creates non-clustered category of index for you. Okay, where can you see your keys? You can go to the keys and you can see your, these are keys, right? Unique key. So that's why all these are keys. You can see all this constant and rule under the keys column of your uh, SQL table. Okay, you have to, if you want to see what kind of rules are there, go to the keys and you can find unique key constant is there. Email and mobile number related unique key constant is also there. Okay, so this is where you can find all your constant defined. Now, do remember whenever you have created a unique key constant, by default a non-clustered index is created. What happens when you create a primary key? By default, do remember the difference between primary key and unique key also. You can have only one primary key per table. You can have as many unique key as you need. There is no restriction on how many unique key you can have. But how many primary key? Only one primary key per table. The reason being, when you create a primary key, by default, it creates a clustered index on the table. When you create a unique key, it creates non-clustered index. When you create primary key, it creates a clustered index per table. There is an SQL Server rule that on a table, there can be only one clustered index. Because that is the rule, when you create a primary key, it creates a default clustered index for you. That is why you can have only one primary key per table. That is the logic behind it. Why you can have only one primary key per table. I'm explaining again. By default, SQL Server has a rule that a table can have only one clustered index. When you create a primary key, by default, it creates a clustered index for you. Because your primary key once created creates a clustered index for you, you cannot have more primary keys on that particular table. Okay, that is the rule. You can have only one primary key and there is only one clustered index per table. Do remember, it is also an interview question. How many clustered index can be created per table? Answer is 1. How many non-clustered index can be created per table? Many. Okay, many. Many is the answer. Now let us go ahead and again try dropping the table and create the same condition. Only change would be you will do the primary key now. What does the primary key rule say? Primary key. Okay. And let's take the example because I have actually done the foreign key from that. Okay. So let the example take this particular example. That will make more sense. Okay. I'm creating two tables now. Let's create this two table. Drop table EMP. Okay. Drop table EMP, select star from EMP. So there is drop table EMP. Okay. So I will say drop table EMP execute. Then I will create a table with a primary key. Can you see? I'm creating a new table employee where the employee number is there. It is an integer field. I'm saying it is a primary key. Okay. Do remember, you always should define a name for your constant. If you say ID, INT, unique key, that works. But it is always recommended to write constant and constant name. Constant and constant name. How do you define a primary key constant name? PK underscore PK for primary key, EMP underscore ID or employee number. This is the name that you should choose for your primary key constant. This is the right way of doing it. It is optional. This particular part, constant and constant name is optional. If you don't do, SQL Server will automatically give a name. That is not good. I will show you what happens also. Okay. So I'm creating a table, employee number, and it is an integer column and giving a primary key to that particular column. Okay. Then employee name is there, date of birth is there. For the sake, let us not go for this. Okay. There are four columns. Assume employee number, employee name, manager, manager name, or manager number, and department number. These are the four columns that I am creating in the table. Okay. So let us create this particular primary key rule for this particular table. Also, we'll do the same thing for the department table. Can you see here? I'm creating a department table. It is having two things. One is the department number and the department name. See here in the department number column, that is a numeric column, I'm creating a primary key. Okay. But do remember here I am saying constant and constant name is optional. Even if I do not specify it, it is okay. So let us go ahead and create it. So both the syntaxes work. If you specify the constant and constant name, that works. If you do not specify, that also work. But what happens when you specify? What happens when you don't specify? What happens? Do remember we have created a table, two tables now: employee, EMP, and department. Is that correct? Now go and expand your keys. Can you see there is a new constant that I have specified known as PK EMP employee number is defined? I have a primary key defined on my employee number column, and it is coming in the piece under my keys column. Now, if you go into the department table, I did not define a name. Can you see how the name is formed here? PK underscore department. The first two parts automatically it created by default. Okay, SQL Server automatically defined PK underscore department. But after that, it automatically given a hexadecimal code that you don't understand where the primary key is, right? To know on which column the primary key is, you have to go to the definition and then only you can find out. How do you go? Right click and script key as create to new script window. Script key as create to new query window. Then the key column will be scripted here. Then only you will know on which column the index is created. Sorry, the primary key rule is created. It is saying alter table name, primary key cluster, and department number ascending. Do you remember this particular keyword that I was talking about? By default, whenever you create a primary key, it is created as a clustered index. Okay. By default, it is. That is where you are seeing this particular keyword known as clustered. Okay. That is the difference between providing a name versus not providing a name. Even if you not provide a name, by default, SQL Server will assign a garbage name to that. PK underscore table name, but then the column name will be very random in nature. Also, another thing to look out for, whenever you create a primary key, by default, an index will be created for you, and that will be a clustered index. Can you see the bracketed cluster at the end? That piece, by default, it's the clustered index. Okay. In similar case for my structure, I have given a name. Similar name of my constraint will be a clustered index created for the same. Okay. Now we have understood the basic definition, but what does it do? The same thing it will do as if we are doing for the other queries, right? If you will try to insert duplicate data, it will not accept and it does not allow any null value. Those are the two rules that you need to remember. In case I want to insert a value into the EMP, right? And I don't have anything called as ID now. I have employee number, employee name, employee name, and I have a department number. Say for an example, I have a department number. The same I will copy. Employee number, employee name, and department number. Department number I will give one. One. Okay. I'm trying to insert a null value into my employee ID, employee number column. Employee number is the primary key column in the employee table. Do remember here, employee number column is integer and it's the primary key. Primary key rule says what? It cannot accept a null value. Let's see whether it accepts it. It doesn't. Whereas our unique key constant was allowing the insertion of a null value. Only one null value was accepted, but primary key constant does not allow a null value into the column. Clear about that? Now, if I insert one Rahul and a proper value, will it be accepted? Yes. Why? Because it is a not null value. ID column is a not null value, and the data is not there at all. But if I try to duplicate the record, if I try to insert it again, it will throw error. Why? Violation of primary key constant. Why? Because already a value one already is there in my table, and you are trying to insert one more time, right? That is what the rule for the primary key. Any question by far on the primary key? Any questions by far? I said, Vishnu, we'll discuss about the clustered and non-clustered index tomorrow. We are not going to talk about it because it is going to be discussed in detail. Please tell rules. What rule actually? Vijaya, can you be very specific? Sai Vijaya, would you like unmute and speak about? I don't understand this particular thing. Please tell rules means. Will please tell rules at once. Unique and primary key. I have said it so many times. How many more time you want me to repeat? Again, I am saying it. Unique key. Two rules. First rule. It allow one null value and no duplicate value in a particular column. You can have n number of unique key defined in a table. Sorry, sorry about that. And by default, whenever you create a unique key, it creates a non-clustered index. In the primary key, you can have only one primary key per table. By default, it creates a clustered index. And the rule for the primary key is you cannot insert a null value to the column and the data has to be unique in nature. No duplicated data. So Sai Vijaya, is that clear now? Fine. Now let's move to the next type of constraint. Foreign key. Do remember, foreign key is a constraint that ensures data integrity between table. Okay, do remember, just observe it carefully. It is one of the important interview aspect and it is very important from your programming aspect as well. I have created two table here. Can you see that? I have created an employee table. I have created a department table. Okay, let us insert a few rows into the department table. And what did I want to insert? For the department number, I want to insert department number 1, and the department name is IT. And then I will say HR and admin. I will insert 3 rows. It is primary key, so it cannot accept duplicate value. So I will say HR now, and then I will say the admin. Let us insert the data in the table. 3 rows inserted. Let's see the data in the table. Okay, I have 3 rows of data available. The department number 1 means IT, 2 means HR, 3 means admin. Do remember this 3 department number: 1 IT, 2 HR, 3 admin. Okay. Now I am going to build a foreign key between the employee table to the department table. How do I build that? Using this particular command. How do I do that? I will say alter table employee, add constraint foreign key employee on the department number I want to build it. Okay. In the employee table, department number is there. I would say alter table name, add constraint name. I will say alter table name, add constraint name, foreign key. Which column is foreign key? The department column of my employee table is the foreign key that references department tables department number values. Okay, what I'm saying, when you are inserting a record into the employee table, please refer for the department numbers column value in the department table. That means that. Okay, let us verify. First create it, let's see it what happens, and then we'll understand more. I have created this particular foreign key constraint. Okay, I have created this particular foreign key constraint on the employee table. Let's go to the keys, refresh. I can see the foreign keys created here. Okay, now what happens when I create a foreign key? Do you remember how many types of department available in my department table? Only 3 department. 1, 2, 3. Somebody is smart enough and he is trying to insert a department that does not exist. He's trying to insert what? He's trying to insert see, for the department I am trying to insert 5. ID, how many employee record exists? Let's verify. There is only one employee number, 1 exists. So let us insert a value 2, ID value 2, because ID is a primary key. It has to be unique. Name is okay. I will say Gautam. And then the manager number I am not passing. It is fine. I am saying department number to be 5. Let us understand if I insert what happens. Can you see? Insert statement conflicted with the foreign key constraint FK employee department number. The conflict occurred in the database study on the table department, column name, department number. Do you remember what does it mean? That means a foreign key once established, once you create a foreign key, whenever you are inserting the data for a particular column that is referenced in the foreign key, that means I'm trying to insert a value for 5 in the department number. And this department number is a part of the foreign key. Can you see that? Foreign key department number. This department number is a part of the foreign key. When it is a part of the foreign key, it will look for references department tables department number. What happened? When you are trying to insert a value into the master table EMP for the department number column. Before accepting the value, first verify whether a department ID 5 exists in the department table or not. And we know in the department table, there is no value of department ID 5 exist, right? So a foreign key constraint is known as a referential integrity constraint. Reference before doing the action. That means if you are inserting an employee, assigning an employee to department ID 6 and the department 6 does not exist, then your assignment itself is wrong, right? To prevent those kind of error, we build the foreign key relationship between the table. The ground rule is at least the table on which you are trying to build the foreign key need to have an primary key on that particular table. That is the only ground rule for the creating a foreign key. What you need to do on the table on which you are creating the foreign key, at least create a primary key on that table. And the second thing, the syntax is alter table table name, add constant constant name, foreign key references the particular column. This is how you should create a foreign key constraint, and that is what the purpose is. Any question on the foreign key constraints? Are you clear about the foreign key? You are trying to insert a record into the employee table. While inserting the department number 5, it is going and verifying whether the department number 5 exists in the department table. That is what the referential integrity means. Okay. What you are doing? You are doing alter table table name, add constant constant name, foreign key, department number column in the employee table, references department tables department number. That is the clause that you have to add, right? Other than that, I think there will be one more constraint. Let's see the check constraint and the default constraint. Easy. We'll go to the default constraint first, then the check constraint. Okay. Do remember, default constraint assign a default value to the table. Say for an example, I'm trying to assign in the AMP table, there is a default value for the manager number. Okay. There is a manager number field. Okay. What I want to say, if people does not supply the manager number, if people does not supply the manager number, then you default it to 1. What I'm saying, alter table name, employee table, you alter the employee table, add a new constraint, default, my rule is always the same, dfemp. I don't know whether SQL allows it. I have to test it. I am trying the syntax in front of you. But default, typically you can create during the creation of time, but let us try it out. Alter table name, add constant name, default, what would be the default value for the column if not specified, and for which column? For the manager number column. Let's see. Yes, it is allowing. Okay. What I specified, I'm saying in the employee table, for the column number manager number, I'm specifying a default value of 1. That is one way of creating while you are doing the alter table, right? You can also specify the default value during creation also. Say for an example, I will show you this. This is one way of creating that particular thing. We have created the default constraint. Let us see what happens when I am trying to insert a record. Okay. Now I know foreign key is violated, so I will actually try to insert a record that is there. So I will say admin department, Gautam is joining. So I'm trying to insert employee number, employee name, and department number. Do remember I'm not providing the manager number. Okay. I have a default constraint available in my table. Okay. So what happens if I do not specify the manager number? Can you see? For the first grid, we have already inserted the record. At that point in time, there was no default value. But now I have created default constraint for the manager number. Even if I'm not specifying the manager number during the insert, can you see a default value of 1 is assigned for the manager number? The purpose of a default constraint is to specify or default value if not specified. What could be the default value for the gender column? There are M or Fs, right? So by default, I would specify a M if you do not specify the gender. By default, I will default it out to the male. That can be one of the default criteria that I want to assign. Or I will assign by default, if you do not assign a department number to someone, then I will assign him to the admin department. And then later on, I will transfer to some other department. Correct? I can define my own custom rule. That is why you have a default value available for the default constraint available for your use. Now, there is an interview question for the default constraint. Do remember, if you apply a default constraint on a table after creation of the table, the previous values are not changed to the one. See, we did insert the first row record into the table. After that, I created the default constraint. When I created the default constraint, when I tried inserting second row, by default one is assigned. But for the first row, it was already assigned. So default constraint didn't take effect. So do remember, if you are applying a default constraint to an already created tables, the previous rows will have no effect. Whatever value they were returning, that value will be returned. But subsequent, henceforth, if any value you are not specifying, then automatically the value will be assigned to default. But creating a default constraint, does it say that you cannot insert the value into the default to the manager number column? Absolutely not. If you specify a value for the manager name column, it will take it. You will say manager number is 2 and the name is 3 and the name is Gautami. Okay. Now I could specify the manager number and insert a value for the manager number also. If you want to specify any value, that value will be written. But if you don't specify, one will be inserted. Clear about that default constraint? Why your default constraint is needed? And if you want to create the default constraint at the table level, you can do this. While creating the table, if you want to do that, you can actually create like this. Say for an example, during creation of employee, you want to apply a default constraint. You will say manager number integer default 1. Okay, you just specify after that default 1. Your column name, data type, default, and 1. By default, it will create a table for you. It's a default constraint. Creating a dropping the table, recreating the table, and your default constraint is created. If I insert this particular row, it will default insert the value of 1 into the table. Can you see that now? Okay. Now my rule is created. Select start from EMP. The manager number value is 1. Even if I did not specify, automatically it came. The last, any question on the default constraint? The column that we are specifying foreign key should be primary key column in the reference table. Answer is yes. If you are Sai Vijay who has asked this particular question, primary key should be foreign key should be primary key column in reference table. That is answer is absolutely yes. The foreign key column, the column that you are trying to reference here, references column. Can you see that? The references, the department's department number column. The department number column in the department table has to be the primary key. In this column you are trying to reference from the department table. This particular column has to be a primary key, definitely. Okay. Any questions on the default? Are you clear? Now the last part for the today is the check constant. What is a check constant? Check constant is a constant where you can define your own custom rules. Okay. I want to say for an example, this is the check constant I want to apply. Okay. What I will say, I want to apply a check constant that, say for an example, let's add a column in the table. Let's add a column called as alter table employee. Alter table employee. Add column name as age, and then add a constant on that. Add column age, but the data type also has to be specified, right? Add age. then add this particular constraint, add constraint name. Will not say add constant, you will say constant name. Constant ck check constant on the table employee, I will say the rule as greater than 18. It is greater than 18. That is my rule. Greater than 18. GT18 greater than 18. Okay, that is my constant name. I'm adding a column called as add age, integer type of column, constant name. Check the column value should be greater than 18. I don't accept any employee record to be inserted into the table where the age value is less than 18. Okay, I have created a new column. I'm adding a column called as age, that is an integer type. I'm adding a rule called as constant. It is a check constant. Can you see? It is known as check constant. Constant name check. Check what? Check the age column value is greater than 18. Okay. Now I have a column known as check constant. I have a column known as age column also. Let us try to insert a row into the age column and see what happens. I'm trying to insert a record into the age column now. Okay. Record number 4. Employee name is Sashi. Manager number 3. And the age of this particular employee is 12. I'm trying to insert a record for Sasi and I'm assigning a age value for Sasi is 12. Let's see what happens. Employee number, employee name. Okay, department number is also there. Department number 1, IT department, manager number 3, and the age. Okay. It is saying the insert statement conflicted with the check constant CK employee greater than 18. The conflict occurred in the database study on the column age. Why? Because I have a rule that say I cannot accept data for the age column if the age is greater not greater if age is sorry, it has to accept record if the age is greater than 8. It will not accept record if it is not obeying the age greater than 18 rule. I'm trying to insert a record 12 which is not greater than 18. So that is where it is failing. If I try to put the age as 21, will it accept? 21 is greater than 18, so it should accept. Can you see that? So this is what a check constraint rule is all about. If you want to have a custom defined rule for your own mechanism, then any value, and there is a rule also. If it is greater than 18 rule, the exact boundary value is also not accepted. Let's see. I'm trying to insert employee ID 5. Let's see whether it is accepted. Yeah, it is. Why? Because 18 is not greater than 18. 18 is equal to 18, but it is not greater than 18, right? And my rule says the employee age has to be greater than 18. That means I only employ employees whose age is more than 19 years. Had I applied a rule greater than or equal to 18, then it would have accepted the 18 as the value. But as I have mentioned a rule as greater than, the greater than does not accept the same value. 18 is not greater than 18. 18 is equal to 18, but it is not greater than 18. Okay, so these are the 6 constraints that you can apply on the table. And interview question. The most important interview question, the high frequency interview question. I would say be prepared that you are going with one interview question for straightforward into every interview for any data engineering, data analytics, SQL server, SQL database developer, any kind of role you are applying for, right? It is a you are through one question. One question is tell me the difference between primary key and unique key. That question is anyways going to come. Okay. Anyways, you take it for granted. If you have prepared this particular question well, you are prepared for one of your interview questions for sure. Okay. Then types of constraint. What is the constraint? Types of constraint.
give example of check constant. Check constant is not very frequent. That is where interviewer pick that. Typically, people have seen default as a design, primary key for sure, foreign key for sure, unique key for sure, not null for sure, default for sure. But check constant is very rarely used. That is where it is interview favorite. So practice check constant more. They might ask you to give an example of a check constant, create a table, and then apply that check constant rule onto that. And what happens to the value when you apply a default constant on a column, right? I showed if already the table is there and you are applying the default after that, previous rows are unaffected. Only the new rows will be getting the new value of the default constant. That is a rule for that. Okay. Any further question, or can we stop the session now? If you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself. Ask the question. Kalyan, you have a question? Please unmute yourself and speak. Kalyan, would you like to unmute yourself and speak? Not now. On tomorrow we can do it. Not now. We should actually limit our question to the corresponding session because we are time bound. But I will actually attempt this particular question as the first answer to it. Okay. Kalyan, you have your hands raised. You want to ask a question? Would you like to unmute and speak? Okay, fine. Okay, thank you, team. I will actually send you all these things. I will give you some exercise today. Start completing that, and I would ask you to revisit the 70 question document that I have given on the day one for the select queries. Now you should be able to attempt a lot of questions because you have covered your constraints, your rules, because there are a lot of questions around define a rule where the employee cannot insert greater than that. It is all about the constraint rule. Knowingly I have given that, at least you start preparing for it so that when the session happen, you are aware about it. That was the reason behind it. I will give you a question even if it is there ahead in the course that I will teach you. Okay, in that way at least you will do some exercise pre-handed. So I would say just go back if you have not attempted that 70 70 queries writing question. There are a lot of things that is covered right now from the SQL querying perspective, join perspective, subquery perspective. There you can now re-attempt all those questions and see whether you are able to solve all of them. Okay, I have given a lot of queries around the date time yesterday. I would encourage to go through the date time queries one more time because you might find one or two questions from the date time segment altogether. Okay, okay, fine. Talk to you later. Have a good day.